Captain Midnight.
So this really snuck up on me, but Captain America Civil War is now 10 years old, which feels insane. So there's been some celebrations and anniversary events. One of the directors, Joe Russo, sat down at one of those anniversary screenings and said something that really bummed everyone out about MCU Peter Parker. A lot of people have been calling it a retcon. I'm not sure it technically qualifies as a retcon. I don't think it does actually, but it was really disappointing to hear, and that's what I want to talk about this week, because I have a lot of thoughts on the state of Uncle Ben in the MCU. Before I do, I want to say thanks for watching. I've talked on and off about the Webhead for like 9 years now, so if you found yourself watching them and haven't subscribed yet, I'll always appreciate it.
I had the power and I didn't use it. I lost my uncle because I ignored my responsibilities.
Alright, so let me give you the full Russo quote here. Spider-Man was one of my favorite characters growing up, if not my favorite, and what I related to was this idea of a kid with incredible responsibility. I think you could manifest that responsibility through accidental death and feeling the pressure and the sense of loss in your life in a way that would keep the spirit that we wanted. But what Tom Holland is as an actor, if he blamed himself for his Uncle Ben's death, I think he becomes a very different character. So in our minds, no, he wasn't responsible for Uncle Ben's death. That would have been a different interpretation, a more intense interpretation of the character. Alright, so there's a lot to unpack here. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. After nearly a decade of debate over exactly what role Uncle Ben played in the development of the MCU Spider-Man, it's now confirmed that, at least at the start, the guilt over his death was not the basis for Peter becoming a superhero. Not only does this deny the hero the cornerstone of his origin story, I think it also makes him less interesting. Part of what made Spider-Man such an elegantly constructed character in those 11 short pages of Amazing Fantasy 15 and then carried over into his own series was this balance he was able to strike. On the surface, a colorful, wisecracking power fantasy, but with a very solid foundation of guilt and an overwhelming sense of responsibility that emerged from it thanks to his Uncle Ben. I could go on and on about why I love this origin, and believe me, I have, but I think it's worth giving Joe Russo the benefit of the doubt here and thinking about this through the lens of the movie landscape during the production of Civil War, when the third Cap movie was coming out. The Amazing Spider-Man movies were fresh in everyone's mind, and one of the biggest, most lasting talking points used against those movies was how boring it was to see poor Uncle Ben die once again, in a scene that felt kind of perfunctory, like an expected obligation. Now, there are absolutely things I appreciate about the Andrew Garfield movies, and things I think they do well, but I was definitely in that camp. And I still think there's a lot of merit to that complaint, especially when those films robbed us of a potential Sam Raimi Spider-Man 4 just so Sony could start over with a cheaper cast and director, talent who weren't getting their third big bump in pay. Looking back now, so many Spider-Man films later, it's a lot easier to accept that 2 of them feature Uncle Ben dying. Well, okay, 3 if you count the dumb retcon in Spider-Man 3 that I don't really feel like talking about. But believe me, at the time it felt exhausting. And I think it's easy to forget how unique and exciting Holland's more youthful, inexperienced feeling take on the character was when Civil War hit theaters. And the fact that almost everything related to Uncle Ben was left ambiguous didn't seem like a huge deal, since we all knew the character would be getting at least 3 follow-up movies of his own. Plus, Civil War did hint at some tragedy having occurred for May and Peter, even if they didn't spell it out, so it wasn't difficult to fill in the gaps. And say that, yeah, this probably was the classic Spider-Man origin story, we just didn't see it play out on screen. Holland's next 3 movies also mostly sidestepped Uncle Ben, giving us a few little winks like the initials on Peter's luggage in Far From Home, but for the most part, they just avoided it entirely. I do think it's worth mentioning though that those are not Russo brothers movies, and John Watts may have an entirely different take on how he views Peter's backstory. I even made a video back in 2017 arguing that Homecoming was all about Peter's sense of responsibility, even if the actual movie dodged mentioning Ben much at all. Does that video hold up? I mean, it's 9 years old, so probably not, but it is there if you want to check it out. For Watt's part, though, he went out of his way to not give a clear answer about Ben one way or another in every interview I can find. When Watts started production on his trilogy, he was told to avoid anything that had already been done before, clearly a response to the Garfield movies. so he really went out of his way to just not get into it. I think that ambiguity worked perfectly fine for the first two Home movies. You could read between the lines, see the influence of Uncle Ben here and there. Well, okay, I thought I could. Maybe I was purely coping, you tell me. But it was in No Way Home that Ben's iconic line was recontextualized, reused to motivate Peter and push him forward, also due to a close death, but put in the mouth of Aunt May. And at the risk of pissing everyone off, I think it works well in the context of that movie. Obviously, the line coming out of the death of a character that we've grown to like over the course of multiple films hits harder in that scene than Peter suddenly being inspired by the words of a Ben Parker that we never got to meet. But it also really solidified how unimportant Ben was in this version of Peter's story. Something that this Joe Russo quote shows has always kind of been built in from the start. Does this annoy me? I mean, yeah, I think it makes Holland's Peter have a much less firm and compelling reason to become Spider-Man in the first place. I've always enjoyed the MCU's take on the character, but if someone is looking to point out some flaws, I think this is a pretty reasonable thing to take issue with. At the same time though, I can't say it lessens my enthusiasm for Brand New Day too much. What did or did not happen off screen, according to completely different directors, isn't something that'll hold against this movie. And there's rumors, and I will emphasize just rumors, that the movie is looking to engage with Uncle Ben directly in a way that the Holland movies never have before. And what I'm really hoping for is that Destin Daniel Cretton's take on Peter Parker really digs into that sense of guilt the character has. Not because I need to see a slavish recreation of something from the comics, I just think Tom Holland's Peter Parker deserves the full version of this character. I think he's more than earned it at this point. Though they really would have to get a little creative with it, since just adapting the classic origin story really straightforwardly in any form would risk feeling very redundant after May's death, and the similar situation that's already been set up there. It's a really interesting position to be in if you want to get into Uncle Ben at all. Like, can you do something impactful with that character when his most meaningful contribution to Spider-Man has already been handed to someone else? That's a weird problem to have, but I do think it's one that comes with a lot of creative possibilities. A real chance to give us some Uncle Ben moments, maybe in flashbacks, that feel unique and give us a side of, or at least some moments with Ben, that don't retread ground and run into the same issues that The Amazing Spider-Man did. But okay, maybe this does, in retrospect, make me a little less high on Homecoming and especially Far From Home. I still like them, especially Homecoming, but I haven't revisited them in a while. They're probably due for a re-review, so let me know if that's something you'd like to see. It's clear that the Russo brothers wanted to deliver a fun, energetic, and more naive take on Spider-Man in Civil War. And while I have my issues with that movie, I think that's one area where they really succeeded. What came after that, though, was some movies I enjoy, but with a strangely shaky foundation, even a full decade later. I've always liked Tom Holland's Peter Parker, but the skirting around Uncle Ben, only to finally give a version of his death to May, is one of the bolder choices of the Home trilogy. And like I said, I think it's one that can be justified within No Way Home itself, but it also really gave us a Peter that doesn't really have that ironclad reason for putting himself through all this misery throughout most of those movies, only to arrive at it near the end of his third solo film. That's pretty weirdly constructed, and your mileage on it will probably vary. It would be interesting to try to see them fix this, and have Uncle Ben repositioned as a really important figure for Peter. But with so many things set up for Spider-Man to deal with in this Brand New Day trailer, I'm not sure that's something the movie will really have time to focus on without grinding things to a halt. It's left us in this weird place with Spider-Man. And though I am really excited for what comes next, I feel like it'll always be a bit of a sticking point for fans. Marvel and Sony not wanting to do Uncle Ben's death again made sense in 2016 and 2017. But I think the case could be made that in the long run, it's really been to Peter Parker's detriment. But this is one where I want to know what you all think. Does this dampen your enthusiasm for MCU Spider-Man? Was it a problem that you've had with him for years? Or is this all being blown out of proportion? Maybe May's version of the line and her death scene more than justified it as a creative choice for you. I want to know what you think, and I'll be reading it all down below. Okay, switching things up. If you've ever watched a TV show run out of steam, it becomes clear fast. Television gets messy. Being a showrunner is running one of the strangest, most multifaceted jobs out there, juggling management and creativity in a way only a film director has to. But this goes on for years. That's why TV creators are the subject of my new series, Showrunners. In my first episode, I tackled Twilight Zone creator Rod Serling, and next week I'll be releasing one on Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan. It's a weird job, and one that people fall into kind of on accident. I can't wait to get into Gilligan's strange film career, his uphill battle getting Breaking Bad made, and way more. With Showrunners, I want to make a biographical rundown of these creators that analyzes the growth in their work, their common thematic elements that they return to again and again, and something that digs into the shifting tides of the TV industry. You can watch Showrunners right now on Nebula, alongside ad-free videos from creators like Patrick H. Willems, Lindsay Ellis, who has exclusive videos, and CinemaStix's Let's Rewind series, plus over 200 others. Nebula is a great streaming service to find amazing exclusive videos from some of your favorite creators, as well as a well-curated list of new ones for you to discover too. You'll get all my videos ad-free, along with exclusives like Showrunners. You can get 50% off an annual membership, just $30 for a year or $250 a month at go.nebula.tv/captainmidnight. Just use that QR code on screen or click the link below to start with a Rod Serling episode.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.